So I understand we have 20 minutes. So if there is any pressing comment from the team, I think we would get more from that than anything else. So if you want to say something, how you feel at this point, not to praise me. No, I don't need that. Just about the family or your work.
I felt that the emphasis on Mark and your connection with Mark made a marked change in the sessions, and it was just a totally different, such a positive focus upon him and a building focus. Did you feel that way, Kit?
I think everyone saw how Mark really absorbs attention from the whole family, and that is the key issue, to try and get him out of that system somewhat, where the married couple can work on their issues and resolve some of their problems. Like they say, they've never fought, and there's too much other things going on for them to possibly fight at all. One thing that I thought was left out was that there was, when Mark doesn't get what he wants, for his mother to go get water or cook, that he will hit her or punch on the grandmother, and that was minimized a lot. There's a lot of physical intimidation going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I didn't want to, as I say, I wanted to see the resources. I wanted to make them come with their own energy, each person, to be partial to everyone. Maybe you have seen that. And I minimized the pathology and the negatives, because that's my therapy, basically based on the resources of relationships, the options for positive, and somehow to meet on that basis. So that may be very different from the way some other people work. In fact, most therapies are pathology-based, in my judgment, except for mine, which really is not chasing pathology. At least in the last 25 years, I haven't been interested in that. Okay, so where are some comments? Again, the most useful ones are the critical ones, or challenging ones, questioning ones. You come up to the microphone.
We started out with the notion of two diagnostic labels, which are very static concepts. And in the interviews, Mark uses that diagnostic label and the mother, that she's stuck in this diagnosis of schizophrenia. And you talked about resources and the dynamic flow, about the possibility she could get beyond. I'm wondering about the usefulness of diagnostic labels in such almost a Procrustean way, a static way from the very beginning.
Well, in my judgment, diagnosis is very useful for bureaucratic purposes, and insurance companies, and for that. Otherwise, I don't. No, I mean, it's serious to consider the person who has been functioning psychotic, in the psychotic range. It is an important factor. There's nothing wrong with knowing that and considering that, such as the medication, if it's helpful, whether you are diagnosed the X or Y, you should take the medication if it's helpful. There's no question about it. On the other hand, to look at it as a destiny that you are locked into because of a diagnosis and you can't possibly change or something, that certainly is not my orientation. So in that sense, it is more important to look at relationship resources. I can accept that a person is paranoid and thinks paranoid, and I can see that. And maybe as long as he or she lives, will to some extent think paranoid. But still, how much will this person rely on paranoia or paranoid thinking? That can vary. One can still have the core of the thinking and not rely on it and function very well. Or else one can really rely on it and be non-functional. So diagnosis is okay within its limitations, but for therapy, it can be a negative thing to take it seriously. Anyone wants to walk up to that microphone or any microphone?
It seemed that there was a division in the family, maybe in the therapist, I don't know, about the positive aspect, her potential with this diagnosis as a schizophrenic. It didn't seem worked out, and I wonder how you could proceed that way. Whether she could work, what she could do. Apparently she's driving, you know, we got that information. And just what are her, they are her potentialities, but what about, how would you go about looking at them or resolving? He wants to see, the young man wants to see his mother, you know, as locked into something. I mean, that's what it seemed to me to be anyway. What are her possibilities? How would this be discussed? Could this be discussed in the family?
Well, certainly, you know, in caring about everybody, multi-directed partiality, if you look at my literature, you can see that's the major methodological principle of my work. That means that here I have to be partial to all of them. So therefore my first partiality is toward this woman. I care about her and I want to respect her wishes to make progress. I want to acknowledge, as you noticed, that it is good that she is willing to take the medication if it helps her. I praised her for that. If she has any real energy to try, I would like to support that. Absolutely, I wouldn't say, oh, don't try, or something like that. It's completely out of my thinking even. On the other hand, he has, I agree, he has some reasons to see it this way, yeah.
From where we sat here, the grandmother was absolutely central in the family, and I was very curious as to why you waited so long to engage her, and now that you have how you see her role, how you would, if you were the therapist, utilize the grandmother. Thank you. I mean the great-grandmother. I also wanted to know, I have one other. Was the boy's father Polynesian? Did that have anything to do with his going? I had two questions.
Polynesian? There's no evidence to that. Huh? For me it was important to sort of name them according to what to me is the basic role, which was already to me when this young woman agreed with her nodding that I call her mother. I think that was a very important moment for me. I wanted to support that. You see, that's very healthy or very good that she could immediately signal to me, the stranger, to do that. I felt very good about that. Now, the great-grandmother, I wanted to include. I listened to her comments. I Um, I wanted to acknowledge her, which I did, that her daughter says that she can rely on her mother, although I felt the neediness of this old woman too. I wanted to support that they are a family and caring about each other. Now, some of her comments about the great-grandson's flirting or whatever, kind of teasing, which sounded to me like just as much hostile, provoking as playful, especially considering an old person who is not so flexible. It was difficult for me to be very partial to her on the level of really a kind of a real negative statement about this young man that is no good. But my my good feeling was when she was able to say that prior to 2 years, the past 2 years, he has been a good boy or something like that. So that to me was useful. There were many elements. The one major element in this family was what in contextual approach we call split loyalty. How much this schizophrenic daughter or the mother here, how much is caught up in a lifelong role of being a buffer between the parents who basically have deep mistrust toward each other, and they don't deal with it. It would be perhaps a good example of that it's a kind of a subtle mistrust rather than violent battling. And for the child, the violently battling parents may be easier to take than the subtle mistrust. Someone is at the microphone.
Hi. I had 2 points of directions not quite taken, but kind of wondering if that would be a good direction to go. And one would be how if the family might take some of their anger out on grandfather, on Mark, since he is the only male in the household. Mm-hmm. And the other point would be how Mark channels his frustration about having a schizophrenic, unavailable mother. I thought that might be a good direction to go also.
That on the one hand, how anger is channeled toward these 2 males, mm-hmm. and on the other, how frustration is channeled toward this diagnosed young woman.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and from a systemic point of view, these are very likely observations, and again, you know what to do about it. In my approach, to strengthen each person as a person, takes care of, in the relationship, takes care of these things. So as each person will speak his or her own version of convictions or positions, and each can learn to hear the other one a little better, then more and more these patterns become unimportant. And then you build on solid base, not on sand. You know, if you just go in and say, you know, you sit here, you talk like this, you talk like that, you know, if you order them around because you think that's nicer than scapegoating, well, they may please you and sit as you want them to sit, but what difference does it make? If on the other hand you build their spontaneous personality in the relationship, then maybe it's a lasting input. So I take your observation as very likely systemically, and then the question is, how do you deal with it? Anyway, yeah.
It strikes me that Mark was really very important in the whole thing, as you're pointing out. But Mark was having a lot of fun there. What you said was the teasing or the hostility. He was getting a lot of power and fun from the impact on great-grandmother and grandma. And they were having a lot of fun there too with that. So there was a reciprocal thing there, back and forth with them. And I think if Mark hadn't been there, their lives would have been pretty boring. And Father was a little bit threatened by the impact, especially from the two women, on him. And it struck me that maybe that's why Dad is telling Mark, you got to get to work, get to work, get to work. So a little threat there from grandfather, I mean, not father, but grandfather on Mark. And Mom was kind of helpless in the schizophrenic state, but kind of an observer of the whole thing, watching the ping pong match going on, and not too uncomfortable in that.
Yeah. Well, these are very correct observations, and again, the question is what to do with it, with them. And to me, it was very important to bring in the image, my caring, not just image, my caring about Mark's actual father. That was very important for me, because it was a kind of a fairness, and it was also taking the emphasis away from the crazy feedback patterns into human dignity of respecting the responsibility of this man. And I really mean it, that to make a meeting between him and his son might give Mark a different anchor point than just, turning around in this circle.
I would think that
circus
would be good.
And circle.
But if Mark...
Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we would like to thank Dr. Naj for the consultation. We enjoyed it very much, and thank you very much for your questions and for being here. Good day.
Although what I'm going to say now, briefly, sounds like afterthoughts. Actually, they belong to the original presentation, but were left out because of shortness of time. I would like to summarize the contextual meaning of the interventions that I did in this session. I dealt with an original assumption by the therapists that they had considered the revitalization of the grandparents' 42-year-old marriage as a vehicle for reestablishment of appropriate generational boundaries. However, as a consultant, I choose through multi-directed partiality to build on latent family resources through due acknowledgement of every family member's contributions. It was possible to address responsible core aspects in even the chronically psychotic mother and also in the delinquent son. These are, of course, the original diagnosed pathologies in the family. The goal of contextual therapy is a stabilization of trust and positive initiatives between family members, especially as far as consequences for posterity are concerned. Due and fair consideration is a major trust-building resource in the inventory of contextual therapy. From a contextual point of view, we could say that a major, what could be called scapegoating from a classical systemic point of view of family therapy, going back to the early era of family therapy, late 50s even. Now, from a contextual point of view, we can call it parentification when a destructive, trust-demolishing procedure is connected with the scapegoating, namely the acceptance and taking of the contributions of the scapegoated or parentified member, and then to treat them with unjust disconfirming, disacknowledging of their contribution. So where are then the resources that, as a consultant, I was able to try to rely on? How can I find the creditable, the acknowledgeable contributions of the various persons, especially of the diagnosed, the allegedly identified patient members? Well, this connects in contextual therapy with the concept of deparentification. The deparentification is thought of not so much as a restructuring of roles and boundaries, but as giving of credit, giving of due recognition, so that trust is rebuilt. For instance, the mother here, who right in the beginning accepts my suggestion to be called mother rather than by her first name, which is a major step. I treat her as mother rather than treating the grandparents as parents, as it was apparently initially assumed in the earlier phases of the therapy or the therapy discussion. Because here it's clear to see also that mother is available to the fighting, arguing grandparents. She's available to her mother when she's unhappy. She helps her, as she puts it, not to give up. She tries to talk to grandfather for her mother. From a systemic point of view, Linda, who is the mother, absorbs the parents' rage as a sponge and tries to hold them together as a couple. In the contextual framework, we can say that she is locked into the predicament of split loyalty, which is a very complex role to be in for any child. It means that one has to really sacrifice loyalty and trust to either parent, because it is made impossible out of loyalty expectations to the other. So what does she get in return for her contributions? She is viewed as irrelevant, unable to make progress, and the grandfather even sees her as joining grandmother in, quote, pushing him out. So in trying to make definite points about acknowledging her positive contributions, her finishing of high school recently, her wanting to learn a trade, I want to definitely endorse her, and I want to signify this endorsement by my statement, I have hope for you. I also tried to acknowledge Mark's achievements several times as he obtains A's in his school record. Even in regard to his trying to be, in his own way, available to grandmother and great-grandmother. The multi-directed partiality aspect of the contextual approach is also represented by my concern about the absent, divorced father. To all appearances, he is an unusually responsible man. He supports his son even in the face of his obligations toward his new family. So I try to be especially available to him in an area which might be especially difficult for him. Namely, for him to make an initiative to contact his father, who deserves his trust and appreciation. Out of consideration for Mark's understandable hesitation and embarrassment to talk to his father, I raised the issue of inviting his father to a session together with Mark, so that the therapists can support him in establishing a new father-child, perhaps also man-to-man relationship. It is moving how spontaneously Mark responds to this suggestion. He hopes that I can arrange for such a meeting, which of course is not realistic. I am only there for that one occasion. But it is helpful that even though, as consultant, I cannot promise an additional session, one of the therapists takes up the idea of inviting father. I think that it is significant for me to endorse the mother's hope for future, because she accepts medication as useful for her. Many people are reluctant to continue to take medication when they seem to be symptomatically cured or significantly improved. So I use that occasion for acknowledging her and giving her credit in the presence of the family. The circumstance that she needs continuous medication could be used for diminishing her stature. Here it can be used as a resource that it can establish her merit. Another source of multi-generational recognition is in my acknowledging great-grandmother's availability to grandmother, even though great-grandmother is mainly viewed as a dependent old person. It is also important to notice that as Mark describes his teasing of great-grandmothers, he spontaneously uses self-criticism also. He therefore opens up an important, lively discussion about his ambiguous role amongst this family of females due to the fact that great-grandfather, both great-grandfather and grandfather and father, in addition, are absent much of the time. Mark states that he tries to keep great-grandmother's spirit up by calling her sweetheart. It is quite obvious from the agitated discussion among the female members of the family that his mixed attitude about adolescent confusion concerning sexuality and affection is a major source of stimulation for the rest of the family, which they then use as excitement, and yet at the same time blame him as a troublemaker for it. So altogether, I do feel some hope for the family, and I would like to continue supporting the consequences for posterity, which go through Mother and Mark more than through the other members. And yet I would like to involve the supporting role of the grandparents and of great-grandmother. These are some of the additional comments after the session.